When I came into office, I inherited a deal that President Trump negotiated with the Taliban. Under his agreement, U.S. forces would be out of Afghanistan by May 1, 2021, just a little over 3 months after I took office. The choice I had to make as your president was either to follow through on that agreement or be prepared to go back to fighting the Taliban in the middle of the spring fighting season. I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight. If anything, the developments of the past week reinforced that ending U.S. military involvement in Afghanistan now was the right decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves. And the buck stops with me.
After nearly 6 days of silence, President Biden finally addressed the nation on the Taliban's complete takeover of Afghanistan. Joining me now with reaction, Chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp. Matt, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, Buck.
Biden administration can't run from this one. What'd you make of both the speech today and the implications for this White House?
Well, I remember when I worked for President Bush and I had just left after the first term. He was successfully reelected, and a liberal reporter emailed me. We didn't have text back then, believe it or not, Buck. He emailed me after the Hurricane Katrina, which was a real disaster for President Bush. And he said, this presidency is a spent bullet. And I thought it was harsh and wrong. It turned out to be completely right. There are moments when presidencies just kind of almost become lame duck. And I just wonder if this is the moment for President Biden. I didn't know what I thought about this until I sat at an airport last night and saw all these videos. I don't think it matters what your politics is. I think this was an embarrassment for the United States.
Former President Trump certainly agrees. He shared in a statement, it's time for Joe Biden to resign in disgrace for what he's allowed to happen in Afghanistan, along with the tremendous surge in COVID, the border catastrophe, the destruction of energy independence, and our crippled economy. It shouldn't be a big deal because he wasn't elected legitimately in the first place. Putting aside the election issue, Matt, which I know you've dealt with a lot, tell me a bit about the implications here for Biden, not only on the Afghan issue, but just to your point about an almost feeling of lame duck presidency. This is certainly a catastrophe presidency so far.
Yeah, you know, Buck, we've had you at CPAC, and you've been a voice for an America First foreign policy and not being interventionist all over the globe. So I think we can separate these issues about whether or not we should have thousands and thousands and thousands of American troops in a country like Afghanistan, and then look at the course of the last several days, the last 6 days, as you said, and separate those two and say, if you're going to pull out of a country, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Clearly, sadly, tragically, this is a textbook for the wrong way to do it. And, you know, it's not like this is the only disaster the Biden administration is dealing with. They have a disaster at the southern border, which is of their making. They have a disaster on COVID, which is, Chinese corona, which is the Chinese communist government's making. But they've made it worse because they sold a bill of goods to all of us that the thing was under control because we would all wear masks, or we would shut down our schools, or we would treat a vaccine as if it was an inoculation, when a vaccine is only kind of a temporary cure for some, not even a cure, but a medical therapy. So this is a problem that they have. 2/3 of the backbone of Joe Biden's approval numbers, which have been pretty good, right above 50%, are based on his handling on Chinese corona. So if you take that into account, as that starts to break down tragically, the border, which I think is the #1 reason the Republicans will take back Congress next year, and then put this inflation, which is out of control altogether. I mean, this really is Jimmy Carter all over again. The only difference is Billy Carter was known for drinking too much beer and coming up with Billy beer, and the Biden family seems to have a lot more ethical problems than that.
I know that the press is trying to pretend like they're real journos in this moment because there's no defense of the Biden administration withdrawal plan, how they're executing this withdrawal that does not look absolutely absurd. And so I view this as just pseudo-journo opportunism. And if you're talking about that, I think no one does it better than Mr. Tapper over at CNN. But here he is with the Secretary of State, all of a sudden pretending to be a guy who wants to really get answers.
But President Biden, just last month, quote, "The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely." He was wrong. Why didn't you have the troops in there and then let that happen first before taking them out?
Again, I come back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is that status quo was not sustainable.
You keep changing the subject to whether or not we should be there forever, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whether or not this exit was done properly, taking out all the service members before those Americans and those Afghan translators could get out. That's what I'm talking about.
I think it shows that we were prepared. The president was prepared for every contingency as this moved forward. We had those forces on hand, and they were able to deploy very quickly, again, to make sure that we could move out safely and securely as the situation on the ground changed.
Oh, yeah. It was all according to plan, Matt. They totally saw this coming, which is why they said that everything that we're seeing wouldn't happen just a few weeks ago.